Good day, everyone. We will be talking about more syntax. Google Earth Engine uses parallel processing. In parallel processing, it is much more beneficial to use functional programming instead of procedural programming because it is more efficient. Now, in functional programming, we use map instead of loops, map and filter instead of if-else statements. And finally, we will also be talking about an iteration technique, the final part. Now let's take a look at how to implement a map instead of loops. Now we have a let's understand the code line by line. Okay, so we have here var mylist. Okay, we create a variable mylist is equal to ee.list.sequence 1 through 10. So this is just going to create a, a sequence of numbers, sequence of integers from 1 to 10. And then if we want to compute for the square of these numbers, traditionally in procedural programming, we would create a for loop. We create a for loop and then we will square each each element of this list, right? So if we want to use the map method, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to create a function. We need to create a function that squares a single number. Okay, so as you can see right here, we have var compute squares is equal to function. We have a single number input, a parameter, and then it will return the ee.number. It casts it first, and then dot power 2. So this squares that particular number. Now, how do we apply map? So var squares, as you can see right here, which will be our final output, is equal to my list. As you can see, this is the my list here, the original list, and then dot map, and then you input the function that you just created. So what this does is that it will apply this particular function to each and every element in the list. Now, if we print these squares here, we will get this result. So these are all squared. So 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, and so on. Okay, so that is how you apply map. Now let us now proceed to map and filter instead of if-else statements. Now, the problem that we will be using here is how to get the odd numbers from a list. Okay, so how do we do that without using if-else statements? So here is an algorithm that we can follow to do that. So first we create a function. So var get odd numbers function with one parameter. And then the first thing that we do is we cast the number and convert it into an Earth Engine number. Okay. And then we compute the remainder. Right. So this will number that mod 2. So this will determine if it is odd or even, right? So if it is even, then we will get a remainder of 0, and if it is odd, we will get a remainder of 1. Now so we will return number that multiply remainder. So what we will get here is if the number is even, then it will turn to 0, and if it is odd, it will remain the same. So after creating this function, we will then apply this function to all of the elements in the list. So as you can see right here, we created a new list, and then the old list, mylist.map, and then we apply our get odd numbers function to each and every element in this list. Now we will now create a new odd numbers variable here, and then is equal to our new list, and then we will use, if we go to the docs here, if we go to the docs, let's go to the list. So we have this function remove all. So if you're not familiar with it, you can just take a look here. So it's very intuitive. So remove all, and the argument is zeros here. Okay, so it will remove all the zeros, and now we are left with all of the odd numbers that we want. Okay, so we will not So instead of printing this, I think this is a typo. So we need to print our final result, odd numbers here. Okay, so let's try to run this. Okay, so as you can see right here, we are left with all of the odd numbers in our initial list, the my list. So remember, the my list is the sequence 1 to 10. Okay, so finally, let's proceed to the iteration method. Now, this method takes a little bit of getting used to. So you have to read the iterate function. You have to be familiar with it first. So you can just read it here in the docs. But in this example, we will try to compute the Fibonacci numbers. So I hope that you will get an intuitive understanding of how this algorithm works through this example. So if we want to compute the Fibonacci numbers, first is we will create a function which takes two parameters. So the iterate method is very specific with this. The function must take two parameters, the current and the previous, so that it can use it for iteration. So it is important to note that in a Fibonacci sequence, Fibonacci numbers, you use the previous only because here our previous is 0, 1, and for 0, 1, then you add 0 and 1, and then you add 1 to the list. Then now the new previous is 1 and 1, you add 1 plus 1, you get 2, you add 2 to the list, and so on. So you continue in that direction. So as you can see here in the function, we have current and previous. Then now we create a list. So previous is equal to ee.list, and we put the previous here. Okay. So in the previous, we will simply be adding the two previous values in the list. So we get the -1 and then -2. Okay. -1 index and -2 index. And then the previous dot add. So the add here is not the add function that we use in number. So this is, take note, this the previous is a list. Now the add here means it will add an element. It will add an element to the list. Add an element to the list. And then inside here, n1 and n2 are numbers. So this is the add, the arithmetic add. Okay. So that's our function. And then we create here a number of iterations. So we will just create ee.list.repeat 1 to 10. So basically we have the output of this is a list with 10 ones in it. Okay. And then we need to specify the starting values here, var start, so 0 and 1. And then finally, we use the iterate function. So we create a new variable here, named sequence. And this num iteration here, num iteration dot iterate, and then we input the algorithm and then the start. Now if we run that, you will get Fibonacci numbers here. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89. So 10 all in all after the zeros, 0 and 1. Okay, so the current here, this can be a little bit confusing first, but we will get used to this iterate method as we use some satellite images. So the current here, we didn't use the current here because as I've said earlier, we only use the previous numbers in computing the Fibonacci sequence. So the current here has the value in the number iteration. So it always has the value 1 because we have here that it is repeated, right? Repeated 1, 1, 1, 10 once. And actually, it doesn't matter what the value of the current is. So let's say if I change this to a letter, okay? If I change the value, instead of getting 10 ones, we use 10 A's. Okay? So just to prove that the current here is not used in the calculation. So if you use that, you will still get the same result. Okay? So mainly the role of number iteration here is just to indicate how many times you want to iterate. But if you're dealing with satellite images, of course, we will be using the current, or maybe it depends on your particular algorithm that you're going to use. Okay, so that's it for iteration. We will get to know this function more in future videos. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something in functional programming concepts, and I will see you in the next video.